The light was still gray as they rode, for the sun had not yet climbed over the black ridges of the haunted mountain before them. A dread fell on them, even as they passed between the lines of ancient stones and so came to the dim halt. There, under the gloom of black trees that not even Legolas could long endure, they found a hollow place opening at the mountain's root, and right in their path stood a single mighty stone like a finger of doom. "My blood runs chill," said Gimli, but the others were silent, and his voice fell dead upon the dank fir needles at his feet. The horses would not pass the threatening stone until the riders dismounted and led them about. And so they came at last, deep in the glen, and there stood a sheer wall of rock, and in the wall the dark door gaped before them like the mouth of night. Signs and figures were carved above its wide arch too dim to read, and fear flowed from it like a gray vapor. The company halted, and there was not a heart among them that did not quail, unless it were the heart of Legolas of the elves, for whom the ghosts of men have no terror. "This is an evil door," said Halbarad, "and my death lies beyond it. I will dare to pass it none the less, but no horse will enter." "But we must go in, and therefore the horses must go too," said Aragorn. "For if ever we come through this darkness, many leagues lie beyond, and every hour that is lost there will bring the triumph of Sauron nearer. Follow me." Then Aragorn led the way, and such was the strength of his will in that hour that all the Dunedain and their horses followed him. And indeed the love that the horses of the rangers bore for their riders was so great that they were willing to face even the terror of the door, if their masters' hearts were steady as they walked beside them. But Arad, the horse of Rohan, refused the way, and he stood sweating and trembling in a fear that was grievous to see. Then Legolas laid his hands on his eyes and sang some words that went soft in the gloom, until he suffered himself to be led, and Legolas passed in, and there stood Gimli the dwarf, left alone. His knees shook, and he was wroth with himself. "Here is a thing unheard of," he said. "An elf will go underground, and a dwarf dare not?" With that he plunged in, but it seemed to him that he dragged his feet like lead over the threshold, and at once a blindness came upon him, even upon Gimli, Glóin's son, who had walked unafraid in many deep places of the earth. Aragorn had brought torches from Dunharrow, and now he went ahead bearing one aloft, and Aladdin with another went at the rear, and Gimli, stumbling behind, strove to overtake him. He could see nothing but the dim flame of the torches, but if the company halted, there seemed an endless whisper of voices all about him, a murmur of words in no tongue that he had ever heard before. Nothing assailed the company, nor withstood their passage, and yet steadily fear grew on the dwarf as he went on, most of all because he knew now that there could be no turning back. All the paths behind were thronged by an unseen host that followed in the dark. So time unreckoned passed, until Gimli saw a sight that he was ever afterwards loath to recall. The road was wide, and as far as he could judge, but now the company came suddenly into a great empty space, and there were no longer any walls upon either side. The dread was so heavy on him that he could hardly walk. Away to the left something glittered in the gloom as Aragorn's torch drew near. Then Aragorn halted and went to look what it might be. "Does he feel no fear?" muttered the dwarf. "In any other cave, Gimli, Glóin's son, would have been the first to run to the gleam of gold, but not here. Let it lie." None the less he drew near and saw Aragorn kneeling, while Aladdin held aloft both torches. Before him were the bones of a mighty man. He had been clad in mail, and still his harness lay there whole, for the cavern's air was as dry as dust, and his hauberk was gilded. His belt was of gold and garnets, and rich with gold was the helm upon his bony head, face downward on the floor. He had fallen near the far wall of the cave, as now could be seen, and before him stood a stony door closed fast. His finger bones were still clawing at the cracks. A notched and broken sword lay by him, as if he had hewn at the rock in his last despair. Aragorn did not touch him, but after gazing silently for a while, he rose and sighed. "Hither shall the flowers of Cymbeline never come unto world's end," he murmured. 9 mounds and 7 there are now green with grass, and through all the long years he has lain at the door that he could not unlock. Whither does it lead? Why would he pass? None shall ever know. for that is not my errand," he cried, turning back and speaking to the whispering darkness behind. "Keep your hoards and your secrets hidden in the accursed years. Speed only, we ask. Let us pass, and then come. I summon you to the stone of Eric." There was no answer, unless it were an utter silence more dreadful than the whispers before, and then a chill blast came in, which the torches flickered and went out, and could not be rekindled. Of the time that followed, 1 hour or many, Gimli remembered little. The others pressed on, but he was ever hindmost, pursued by a groping horror that seemed always just about to seize him, and a rumor came after him like the shadow sound of many feet. He stumbled on until he was crawling like a beast on the ground and felt that he could endure no more. He must either find an ending and escape or run back into madness to meet the following fear. Suddenly he heard the tinkle of water, a sound hard and clear as a stone falling into a dream of dark shadow. Light grew, and lo, the company passed through another gateway, high-arched and broad, and a rill ran out beside them, and beyond, going steeply down, was a road beyond sheer cliffs, knife-edged against the sky far above. So deep and narrow was that chasm that the sky was dark, and in it small stars glinted. Yet as Gimli after learned, it was still 2 hours ere sunset of the day on which they had set out from Dunharrow, though for all that he could then tell, it might have been twilight in some later year, or in some other world. The company now mounted again, and Gimli returned to Legolas. They rode in file, and evening came on, and a deep blue dusk, and still fear pursued them. Legolas, turning to speak to Gimli, looked back, and the dwarf saw before his face the glitter in the elf's bright eyes. Behind them rode Aladdin, last of the company, but not the last of those that took the downward road. "The dead are following," said Legolas. "I see shapes of men and of horses, and pale banners like shreds of cloud, and spears like winter thickets on a misty night. The dead are following." "Yes, the dead ride behind. They have been summoned," said Aladdin.